Welcome to a new episode of the Queer Pridecast. Today's guest is Igor Chervinsky, a sociologist, LGBTQ activist, and PhD student from Crimea, Ukraine. In 2023, Igor co-founded the French association SAVA to support queer people fleeing homophobia in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Today, he'll talk about the experience of being an invisible refugee and the difficulty of social integration faced by queer migrants. So, hi, Igor. Welcome to the episode. Thank you for saying yes to my invitation to guest for this episode. I want to talk about first, before we started this episode, we were talking about your experience as an invisible refugee. Could you define that for our listeners, for our watchers? Like, what do you mean when you say invisible refugee?
Basically living abroad in exile with a legal status which is different from being a recognized refugee, say with a work visa or with a study visa. And I would say it's a privilege because you can get such a visa in the first place if you have a good enough command of the local language, and you can actually get enrolled at a university or find a job. And in the first place, it's an avenue for your inclusion and integration in the host society. But it turns against you when something goes wrong with your legal status. For example, which was my case, I was denied working authorization, and as a result, I found myself in a situation where I did not have any residence permit and lived kind of as an so-called illegal migrant in France, even though I had previously a permanent job contract, a full-time permanent job contract, and a C2 level of French, which was certified. I actually took the DALF exam, DALF C2 exam, and I got the 76 out of 100 score, which is a very high score. But I was denied residence rights by the French state, who just claimed that my employer did not respect some procedures and stuff. So I was not seen by the French state as a person in need of international protection, but as a regular, working migrant from abroad who just wants to stay for longer. And in the context of the rise of right-wing populism in France and more globally across Europe, I was denied the right to stay. So, yeah.
You were helping queer asylum seekers as well before. Would you say how was that experience knowing that you were helping asylum seekers, you were helping refugees, but you yourself eventually experienced what it felt like being an invisible refugee? Did you see that these people had a similar experience? Like they were competent, they were looking for work, they were looking to integrate in society, but they found it more difficult to integrate in society?
Yeah, I think that their being queer is the reason they found themselves abroad in exile in the first place. So yeah, I would say that it's when you in your home country, like Russia or I don't know, maybe Saudi Arabia or Iran, so countries that criminalize homosexuality and being something other than straight and cisgender. You can face discrimination and you can face very poor, bad treatment. But sometimes this discrimination can be felt as something less, I would say, less uncomfortable than discrimination that you face in your host country, like France, being an immigrant or being an immigrant of color, a person of color. So I think it really depends from person to person. For me, for example, I'm gay and I could live in Russia and hide my sexuality and hide my identity and pass for a straight cisgender men, and that would be I wouldn't be very visible as a queer person. So I can say that. And then in France, I was a migrant, and so now I live in Switzerland. In France, I was a migrant with a Slavic name. And although I'm kind of white and I do not belong to the community of racialized or migrants of color, I felt more discriminated against in France as a foreigner than I felt in Russia as a gay person. So I think that people may feel the same, that as a foreigner, as a migrant, as a refugee, they feel more excluded and more discriminated in a host society than they used to feel back in their country of origin. But I think it's my perspective due to my privileges of looking cisgender and not looking very queer in the eyes of the majority of population, because there are many people I helped and many of my colleagues and friends who are trans women and trans men who feel much more comfortable, even despite of discrimination in France than in Russia, because in Russia they could just be beaten or bullied every day when they went into the street. So yeah, it really depends. So I would say the biggest problem for integration of queer persons, queer refugees, is the same as for the integration of refugees in general, is that the society, the French state in particular, puts a very high standard on the integration, puts a very high standard to which an asylum seeker and a refugee has to correspond, and in which they have to fit. But at the same time, they do not provide opportunities to actually meet those criteria. For example, I accompanied one guy who obtained asylum in France, and he wanted to enroll himself in a full-time university language course, and for 1 year and a half he could not enroll because he was informed every time that there are not enough places funded by the state.
This is a queer asylum seeker.
Yes, it's a queer asylum seeker. He actually was entitled. It was his right to benefit from this full-time language and culture course, but the state did not provide enough funding for this program so that he could benefit from it. But he was actually very eager to learn French and to integrate culturally, let's say, so, and linguistically and socially and professionally, but he faced a lot of barriers. And another example is my colleague at the Association Ça, who is a trans woman. And after being recognized as a refugee with her partner, who's also a trans woman, they were assigned to a social housing, which is around 10-11 square meters for two persons, including a toilet and bathroom. So everything including, it's 10-11 square meters. Whereas legally in France, there must be at least 8 square meters per person. So for two persons, the housing must be 15 to 16 square meters. And so I was once, earlier this spring, I was invited to speak at the French Ministry for Foreign Affairs about the rights of Russian LGBTQ peoples living in Russia. And in the couloirs, I asked the French ambassador for LGBTQ rights, Jean-Marc Berton, to help us out with this situation with housing, if he could do it. And he said, yes, I can do it. Write me an email. So I wrote him 2 emails, one like immediately after the conference and one in 2 weeks, and he never replied. And Then we contacted with another association, the person responsible for this social housing, then the head of the OFI, so the state agency for the integration and immigration, who replied us that he's not responsible for the housing of recognized refugees. And then we contacted we sent an email to the deputy mayor of Paris responsible for housing, and we sent an email to a member of the city council from a communist party, and none of these persons ever replied. So we were just asking something which is legally due to recognized asylum seekers, trans women from Russia, and which is so that their social housing actually corresponds to legal requirements that the French law imposes on housing in general to respect human dignity. Actually, the term human dignity appears in the text of the law itself. So in order to so a housing which fails to meet this criteria in French porte atteinte à la dignité humaine. So actually infringes the human dignity, I would say. And none of these persons who are actually directly responsible for ensuring that the social housing complies with the legal requirements never replied to us. So obviously they don't give a fuck about civil society initiatives, and they don't give a fuck about like the queer asylum seekers and queer refugees that actually live in Russia. But I must say that LGBTQ, the ambassador for LGBTQ rights, Jean-Marc Berton, he has been a good ally, of grassroots activists previously. So he helped us out in multiple cases. So it was the first time I actually did not get a reply from him. But previously, he used to help us out in different practical situations, for which I'm, of course, very grateful to him. So overall, to draw this general picture is that the right-wing populists, right-wing politicians, the Ministry of the Interior and the French state say all the time, those refugees and migrants do not want to learn our language. They do not want to respect our culture. They do not want to work. But in reality, it turns out that refugees and asylum seekers who qualify for international protection, who want to learn the language of the host country and who respect its culture and who want to learn its culture and history, they are denied these opportunities by the state, who places barriers to integration and who places barriers to becoming part of the society. And I think it's very hypocritious as a posture. Also, it's very hypocritious to denounce the atrocities committed abroad with regard to LGBTQ people, while ignoring and turning a blind eye on material and social hardship faced by LGBTQ refugees in your country.
So you would say that there's
problematic.
You would say that there's this disconnect between what they say and what they actually do, because they say that these these values are important, like human dignity, a right to work, right to decent housing, but also at the same time, like there are structures and systems in place that make it really difficult for queer asylum seekers to integrate.
Yes, I think so. I must say that, of course, the atrocities committed against LGBTQ people, against political opponents of systems in countries like Iran or Turkey or Russia are, of course, much more severe in terms of violation of human dignity and physical integrity than the material hardship and barriers to integration that refugees face in France or in other countries. Of course, it's a totally different level, right? I must say this. But at the same time, when people who faced a lot of discrimination and exclusion as trans people, for example, in Russia, when they arrive to France, yes, they are not beaten in the street. But at the same time, in Russia, they could not find a job because they wouldn't just get invited for an interview, or they would be invited for an interview, and then a guy looking at a male name, surname on a passport and seeing a woman in front of him, he would just say, no, bye. In France, you would not get invited for an interview because you have a Slavic name, surname, or because you don't have the right to work, or because the prefecture is issuing you residence permit for like 2 years. And you have to explain to potential recruiters that actually you have the right to work and that it's the state that takes too much time to issue a residence permit. And people would, like regular employers, wouldn't just go into all these details. They would just prefer another candidate. So, or for example, I have a problem with so I know a guy who actually was a recognized refugee. Who was there was a couple of guys who were recognized refugee, but the OFPRA, so the body responsible for processing the asylum applications, did not communicate this decision to other French authorities, so they could not get their documents that they were recognized refugees from the prefecture, because the prefecture did not get this decision from OFPRA, and they could not actually change their social housing because OFPRA did not communicate their decision. So in the eyes of all French authorities, they were still considered as asylum seekers, whereas for like half a year, they have already been recognized as refugees, and they could not work. They could not find a job. They did not have the right to work. They did not have the right to like certain kind of type of benefits, because they could not prove that they were actually recognized refugees for a long time already, because of this failure of this French state to communicate between different bodies. And this is very problematic. So yeah.
So do you think it's harder for people, for refugees, of course, because you yourself, you've experienced how difficult it was and how you were in a state of like precarity, right? Your residence card got denied. You weren't able to stay. You had a lot of back and forth with the French government. Would you say that it's harder as a refugee to find solutions?
Well, I think in my own eyes, so I will be speaking through from my personal experience, right? I'd say that I didn't really feel in any way different from other implicit refugees or the people in exile, like non-LGBTQ people in exile, in terms of the opportunities I have for finding a place in a new country and building a new life. I think it may be even easier for me because as an LGBTQ person, like as a gay person, I have access to the LGBTQ community, and this community network, it actually helped me a lot because, yeah, for the listeners, I immigrated to France with a student visa in 2022. In 2022, I finished my master's at a university in Paris, and I had a 1-year visa that allowed me to look for a job after the university, after I graduated. So I found a job and I was employed with a permanent contract, and I had the C2 level in French, certified C2 level in French. And after like 6 months, I was refused the residence permit, and I was fired from my job, and I found myself in a situation where I didn't have any source of income, and I had like 700 euros to pay for the rent, and I could I had very few money left, and I could have as well ended up in the street, living just in the street. One day I have a permanent job, full-time job contract at a very good, like a very decent work. I mean, I did social work with migrants as well, helping young people and teenagers from Africa and Northern Africa to kind of integrate in the French society, and was an association fully funded by the state. So I was kind of a state-employed worker. But I was fired because of that, and I could have ended up in the street. Hopefully, I had a very good network of people who helped me out in terms of if I ever needed to find a place to live for free, I could have that. So I say there is not that much difference between LGBTQ asylum seekers and other asylum seekers. I would say there is a great difference depending on whether you're white or of color. If you're a person of color, you will have much more difficulties living in France or, well, in the majority of other countries. But France is different from other countries because it has legislation that prohibits any kind of discrimination based on skin color and religion. But in reality, you see a lot of that. So I would say the biggest problem of the French state and of France as a country in terms of dealing with migration and the influx of refugees is that it expects a lot from refugees and asylum seekers, but at the same time it poses great barriers for integration and for learning the language, for finding a job, and sometimes these barriers can be unsurmountable. So I was very happy and lucky and privileged to find a fully funded PhD position in Switzerland. So when I was denied residence permit, I could just go to another country and have a life in Switzerland. But this is not a case for the majority of people who have to continue fighting with the bureaucracy to just have to make them respect their rights. And yeah, I would say that instead of saying, let's close the borders, let's deny more residence permits, the French state should sponsor more and more efficient language courses, should make its public services more efficient, so that people who want to learn the language and who want to find a job and to build a new life in a new country have the opportunity to do so, and those who commit violent crimes get deported, or who, I don't know, go through some kind of procedures that help them rebuild their lives. But in reality, we see that the French state, now the Ministry of the Interior is headed by Bruno Retailleau, they just want to deny more residence permits. So as a result, France will see more illegal migrants living in France, not because they came illegally to the country, but because they were just denied residence permit. But they will not go back to their country of origin because they are most likely implicit refugees. Like it was my case, and they will continue living in France. They will continue working illegally and without any protection of their rights, and they will not pay taxes because they will be working illegally, and they will become invisible for the state because according to the state they are no longer there, but in reality it's not the case. So instead of denying the right for a residence in the country, it will not change anything anyway. It will only make things worse. The state should become more efficient in terms of dealing with foreigners and migrants, and provide more opportunities for study, for language learning, for professional integration. This is actually lacking in France. Now I'm living in Switzerland, and in Switzerland I came in the first place as a kind of a qualified foreigner who is employed at a university, and I'm the same person, but by the bureaucracy I'm considered as a different kind of person. Yeah, I'm not considered as an asylum seeker or as a non-qualified worker. And in France, I was considered as a non-qualified worker. In Switzerland, I'm considered as a qualified worker, but I'm the same person with the same degrees. Like, yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the importance of like having a community, like a strong network, especially for queer people, like trying to integrate in a new society. Do you have organizations in mind? Are there official organizations in France where people who are seeking asylum or refugees, migrants could connect to?
I think yes, in every city or town, there is a queer community, or at least community center, or a centre LGBT, or something of that sort. Trying to kind of volunteer at a couple of events, just going there from time to time and sitting and, I don't know, chatting with people is a good thing. It's a good way to find some connections and friends. But asylum seekers are often spread randomly across the country, and sometimes they are sent to a village somewhere where 700 people live, and there is absolutely not a single LGBT center there, and this is problematic. But finding an opportunity to go at least once a month to the closest big city or big town with an LGBTQ circle there is a good way. It's just at least something. For me, it was I came to the Pride des banlieues, so the suburban pride of Paris, which took place in Saint-Denis in 2023. That's how I met another Russian-speaking activist who volunteered for the LGBT Center of Paris. And that's how we decided to create an NGO together, the L'Association Ça Va. And I think, yeah, it's a good way to find connections, to establish connections with people from all around the world who just who are there for the same reason, or not only because there are people of French origin who feel solidarity with LGBTQ community, and people coming from abroad to seek protection in France. Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to establish connections.
Thank you, Igor. Merci beaucoup. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you very much.